I was driving to deliver and install machines, but I was running late. So I decided to keep driving even though it was late at night. There were no streetlights, and I didn't see any other cars around. Suddenly, all the lights on the truck's dashboard turned on, and then the truck stopped working. Everything went dark. I stopped the truck, but it wouldn't start again no matter what I did. It was very quiet, and I felt scared. I called for help on my phone and looked up to see something moving in front of the truck, just out of reach of the lights. Finally, I got through to someone, but they said it would take 3 hours for a mechanic to arrive. So there I was, sitting in the dark with only the sound of the hazard lights clicking. I looked out the window again and saw more movement. I quickly turned on the bright lights and saw 3 wolves eating something on the road. I honked the horn, but they didn't seem bothered. It was creepy, so I turned off the lights. Suddenly, I heard a scary scream coming from right behind the truck. Then something hit the truck hard, making it shake. I turned on all the lights and kept honking the horn. I looked in the mirrors, but all I saw was a shadow moving across the road. The wolves were gone too. I could hear something moving in the bushes nearby. Finally, I saw headlights in one of my mirrors. It was the mechanic. But when he opened his door, we heard the scream again, and the noise in the bushes got louder. He quickly closed the door, and my phone rang. He called me and asked what was happening. He sounded scared. I didn't know what it was, and neither did he. So he called the police. 2 police officers arrived and shone their lights around. I finally got out of the truck, feeling relieved. We heard the scream a few more times while the mechanic fixed my truck. Thankfully, it got quieter each time. The police didn't know what was going on either. They seemed scared too. The mechanic finally fixed my truck, and I made it to my hotel for the night. There was a big dent on the side of the truck, about 7 feet off the ground. I still don't know what happened that night, and I don't think I ever will. But I'm sure I'll never drive through that area at night again. Before we jump into our second story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying the content. Stay tuned for more updates. One night, my father was trying to grab a few hours of sleep in the back of his truck. He had to drive a bit longer than he should have, pushing through because of tight schedules and heavy traffic earlier in the day. As he lay there, he heard some small bumps from outside, like the sound of a raccoon trying to get into a metal shed. His first thought was, maybe it's just a raccoon. But then, things got weirder. The noises continued, and he started to hear mumbling from outside. It was clear it wasn't just an animal. There were a couple of guys out there, maybe 2 or 3 of them. My father was sure this wasn't a normal situation, so he tried to get up, but he couldn't. It was like his mind was fully awake, but his body wouldn't respond. It wasn't sleep paralysis, though. It turned out these guys had slipped a rubber tube through the truck's small skylight, which was slightly open for some fresh air while he slept, and pumped some sort of knockout gas or something similar into the cabin. Barely conscious, my father could only lie there and watch as 2 men entered the cabin after messing with the lock for a few minutes. They took everything they could find: his work and personal phones, his wallet, and even his shoes. What scared him the most was one of the thieves searching everything thoroughly, giving him a complete pat-down, checking every pocket and even under his pillow, anywhere valuables might be hidden. The most surprising thing about this story is how my father told it to me like it was just another hazard of being a trucker. He said incidents like this aren't uncommon out there. He's heard plenty of horror stories from other drivers, but he chose to share this one with me, keeping it within the family for now. Maybe another time, he'll share more. I stopped at a truck stop on my way to Melbourne from Sydney. It was dark, with no streetlights or other vehicles around. I turned off my truck's lights, shut off the engine, closed the curtains, and locked the truck from both sides. I climbed into bed, but the summer heat made it hard to sleep, with temperatures reaching around 30 degrees Celsius at night. I tossed and turned for about 5 to 10 minutes, mentally planning my day ahead. Suddenly, the passenger side door opened slightly, and the cabin light turned on. I was startled. My truck was fairly new and in excellent condition, so there was no question about the door being faulty. I sat there, expecting someone to approach and see me holding the rod we use for tightening belts. But no one came, and there was only eerie silence. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of bed, walking around the truck. There were no other trucks or cars nearby, just me and my fully loaded B-double. After about 5 to 10 minutes of feeling unsettled, I locked everything up again and went back to bed. The next morning, as I woke up and tidied up the bed, I opened the curtains to find a cemetery right next to the truck stop where I parked. All my hunger and laziness disappeared in that moment. I didn't bother with shoes or pants. I just grabbed my keys, started the truck, and got out of there as fast as I could. My brother used to be a truck driver back in the 90s and early 2000s. He shared this eerie story with me a few months ago. He was cruising through Pennsylvania on his way back to New Jersey. It was late, and he decided to pull over on the side of the road behind 2 other trailers to catch some rest. In the early hours of the morning, he was jolted awake by a loud banging on his truck's right door. Startled, he leapt out of the sleeping compartment, clutching his trusty bat. Peering out the window, he found nobody there. But then, as if to follow him, the banging echoed on the left side. Feeling a shiver crawl down his spine, he scanned the darkness outside, but it offered no answers, just an unsettling silence. Before he could gather his thoughts, the banging intensified, now assaulting both doors simultaneously. The force was so immense that it shook the entire truck. With a racing heart, he flung open both curtains, expecting to confront whoever or whatever was causing the disturbance. To his bewilderment, there was nothing but empty space outside. Fear gnawing at his nerves, he swiftly retreated to the driver's seat and fired up the engine. Glancing ahead, he noticed the other 2 trucks had also sprung to life. It was as if they too had encountered the same inexplicable terror. My dad spent many years as a trucker, and he's gathered quite a collection of strange tales from the road. One story that always stands out happened late one night at a way station that used to be an old train station. As he parked the truck, he noticed a figure walking along the train tracks with a lantern. Concerned, my dad called out to see if the person needed assistance, but the individual continued walking without acknowledging him. He called out again, but still no response. He decided to report it to the person at the station's office. To his surprise, the individual pointed to an old photograph on the wall, asking if it was the same person my dad had seen. It turned out to be a photo of a rail yard worker from decades ago, and my dad had witnessed this lone figure walking on the tracks. It's intriguing how many others have reported similar sightings, sparking curiosity and questions. Aside from this eerie encounter, my dad has encountered his fair share of harrowing scenes on the road, accidents, injuries, and areas cordoned off with sheets concealing something grim. One incident that haunts him involved a motorcyclist in a horrific freeway accident. Witnessing such tragedies serves as a stark reminder of the dangers truckers face daily. I used to work for a company that owned a big Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. It was super heavy, over 100,000 pounds. To move it, we had to use an old tractor from the 1980s with a drop trailer. Both were still working, but they were pretty old. One day, they asked me to deliver the bulldozer to another company, and I said yes. We loaded up the dozer, tied it down on the trailer, and I hit the road. Now, There's this one intersection on the state route that's really tricky. It's at the bottom of a hill, and if you're coming down from the top, you can't see the stoplight until you're over the hill. Usually, though, you have enough space to stop safely. As I approached this intersection, someone on the CB radio started shouting about traffic on the hill. But my CB radio wasn't working properly, so I only caught every few words. I slowed down as I reached the top of the hill, mostly because I didn't like this intersection. Normally, I'd have had plenty of time to stop, even with the road being a bit icy, but things weren't normal that day. There had just been a bad accident at the intersection, and traffic was backed up halfway up the hill. And because it had just happened, there weren't any emergency services there yet. Now, I had very little space to stop a really heavy load with an old truck. I started downshifting and braking, but then I realized I was hitting big patches of ice on the road. The tires were slipping, and the trailer was pulling the tractor in a weird way. I heard a loud clank, and I felt the trailer jerking the tractor. I looked in my driver's side mirror, but I couldn't see anything, not even the dozer. I panicked and looked in the passenger mirror, and all I could see was the side of the trailer and the dozer. I had made a big mistake by letting the trailer get ahead of me. It felt like one of those, "This is it. This is how I die" moments. I was now jackknifing, still moving, and trying to slow down on an icy hill. I was heading towards an intersection full of stopped cars, and my truck was super heavy. I was sure I was going to crash into those cars and hurt a lot of people. I kept honking the horn as much as I could, but I was also trying to steer the truck. Honestly, at some point, I realized I was just a passenger, standing on the brake pedal. I didn't have enough room to fix anything, so I just kept honking the horn. Finally, the trailer tires warmed up enough to make a loud squealing noise. People in front of me got out of their cars and ran away. They were watching this out-of-control truck coming down the hill. The truck finally stopped just 3 feet from the last car in the intersection. I could sit on the truck's bumper and put my feet up on the car's bumper. The truck had stopped with the trailer jackknifed, blocking all the lanes and the breakdown lane. I was sweating and shaking from the anxiety. People who had left their cars were now screaming at me and pointing up the hill. I looked up and saw another tractor, pulling a tank trailer, going through the same thing I just had. But he had even less space to work with because my trailer was blocking so much of the road. I got out of my truck and ran away. The second truck slid down, stopped, and parked almost perfectly next to my truck. Once his truck stopped, I saw he was going through the same thing I had. We were both super close to having bad accidents. Thankfully, he was pulling a lighter load than me. By now, the guy on the CB radio had warned enough truckers at the top of the hill to slow down. Once the adrenaline wore off, I almost passed out. I've driven a lot of different vehicles, but that was easily the scariest situation I've ever been in. I had no control over what was happening, and that's a scary feeling. I remember the people who had run away from their cars were trying to comfort me. It's been over 20 years since that happened, but I still get scared when I think about it. If I hadn't been able to stop the truck, I would have crashed into all those cars without much effort. Just a little more speed, or a different lane, or even a bit more ice, and things would have ended very differently, and it would have been all my fault. I have a trucker story from my extended family. My uncle used to drive a lot, and he always came back with the weirdest stories. While everyone in the family knew his stories, there was one he told and warned about, even when I was just 6 years old. The moral of the story is never to stay alone in the desert at night. It goes like this. Once he was driving to Chile for a job. The journey there was fine. I made the trip myself later in life, and it's beautiful. When he finished his work, instead of spending money on drinks like he usually did, he wanted to hurry back home for a family gathering. So, he decided to sleep for a bit in the Atacama desert. Well, it's a desert, and he parked far from the road, several miles before the next village. He fell asleep, but woke up to the sound of someone singing. He was confused at first, thinking it was the radio, but it wasn't on. Then the singing stopped, and it sounded more like a scream for help. He wanted to go out and help, but he was still confused. He started the engine and turned on the lights to see where the sound was coming from. He also rolled down the window a bit and yelled to ask what was wrong. There was nothing, but just as he decided to go out anyway, he saw movement at the edge of where the lights reached. It looked like a woman, but her face was completely dark. He freaked out and drove away, non-stop, until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story, his face went pale. Even my grandmother mentioned how he was usually a very cheerful guy. But whatever happened in the Atacama desert completely freaked him out. If you want to see more of the most frightening horror videos, check out our previous videos and subscribe to be notified of new, terrifying experiences. Until we meet again, be cautious of the supernatural and be careful when navigating through dark and eerie situations.